Entering a customer invoice in CenterPoint can also manage inventory of products that you sell. In order to use inventory items, you must own and have registered the Enhanced Inventory module for CenterPoint. Let's go enter an invoice using inventory items. I'm going to go up to Processes, Sales, and Customer Invoices. There is actually another video that goes through the basics of entering a customer sales invoice that you can refer to. We won't go through all those basics on the screen on the Select tab. In this session, we're going to be talking about selling inventory items. So we're going to select a customer we have, Woody, and it filled in all of this information. We're going to go to the Invoice tab, and your inventory items are going to be in the same list as all your other sales items that are service items or non-tracked items. Prior to using an inventory item and selling an inventory item, you will have needed to set up inventory type sales items. When you create an inventory type sales item, it creates an inventory item underneath an inventory account for that particular item. And then when you do your purchases of those different products, you're going to be purchasing into those inventory items created by the setup of the inventory sales item. So we're going to select an item here that we're selling. We have some inventory items for bike helmets and some bikes. And Woody's going to buy a helmet and a bike. So we're going to look at our helmet items. We can either type in a series of characters to find our items, or you could click the lookup button. But we have some different helmets here, and let's say that we're going to purchase one of those. When you select that item, just like it does with your sales items or your service items, it fills in the details that came from that particular item. So it filled in our description. We have an additional description here for this helmet. Here's the revenue account that it's going to. If we have our profit center that we're going to be using, for this particular item, it brought in our sales price. And notice we have a couple other fields that are for inventory items. There's a substitute. If the substitutes button is red, that's indicating that there is not a quantity that we're trying to sell in this particular inventory item. So one thing that's helpful when you're using inventory items is down at the options, there's an option to show information grid. That's going to show you additional information on the inventory that you selected to sell. And we notice here that we don't have any on hand. That's because we're storing our inventory by inventory location, and I haven't selected an inventory location yet. It went to all location. If we slide over here to our other fields and we go to Detail button, we can see that the inventory location is going to all locations. Well, I'm always going to need to pick an inventory location if I'm selling inventory and tracking location. So I'm going to turn on another column on my front screen. I'm going to right-click on the blue row, select Add Remove Columns, and add that column for inventory location. And it is right there. I'm going to bring that up to the top, and then I can move it to where I want. I'm going to move it way up here, and now I can select my location. So we're going to take this, we're tracking inventory locations by a couple of stores. So we're going to take it out of the Red Wing store, and notice now our substitute button is not red. If the case was that we chose that inventory location and maybe there wasn't any left in that location either, we can go to the substitutes button, and it might indicate some other locations that we could take it from instead of the one that we chose. So we could choose maybe the Colorado store or whatever the case may be. There are also, in your inventory items, you're also going to set up if there is another inventory item that might be a suggested substitute. So for this case, I have a Thrasher Youth helmet, and if those are gone, I have a substitute here of perhaps using the dragster youth helmet instead. So those are some different things you can do with your inventory items in order to manage so you don't go into negative quantities on your inventory, and that you have on hand what you're really trying to sell. There's also a price level button. If you have different prices on this inventory, then you can choose your price level button, and perhaps this particular customer, for this one, you want them using a different price level. And you can accept that. That will change the amount of the sales price in this particular row. The other thing you can do is on the notation, that will print on your invoice. That's getting filled in by additional description, but you can add to that notation also. We're going to go back over, and let's just take a look at a detail on an inventory sales item. I'm going to edit this one. And here's where it indicates that this particular sales item is an inventory item. We get our different choices of inventory. We're going to talk about a lotted item in just a bit, but a lotted item or serialized item would be another type of inventory item. So we have an inventory item on the accounts. It additionally will ask for an inventory account. If you pick an inventory item, I got to pick the inventory account that this item was created under. In this case, it went under bike accessories inventory. If this were allotted, there will be information here for the allotted serialized type inventory item. The units of measure, inventories are capable of purchasing in one type of unit of measure and selling in another, and then you would have a conversion factor here. You can have the different price levels we talked about. Your purchase information is keeping track of what vendors you purchased from and what locations you purchased into. And then we have other information, custom fields that we might be tracking for this particular type of item, and then your substitutes. So this is where my list of substitutes came from when I clicked that button on the Thrasher youth helmet. It came up and gave me a suggestion. If those weren't available, I could use the dragster ones. So there's some different fields on your inventory items. You can expand this inventory item. And so what's happening here, when you sell an inventory item, there is more happening than just increasing the account receivable and increasing the revenue account of product sales in this case. It's also going to reduce your inventory at the same time. So here's my inventory item that's underneath my bicycle accessories inventory. And the offset to it is my cost of goods. So it's creating this cost of goods journal for $11 in this case. I had said in my inventory item that my cost is $11, and that was in my last used that it was purchased at. So it picked up $11 to cost based on the quantity that I'm selling. So those are some journals there. On our next item that I'm going to do, it will be a allotted item. So we're going to sell a bike. And as soon as I picked this Youth Bike 20, it is a lotted item. It's an inventory that's lotted, meaning that when I purchase this inventory, I'm keeping track of different lots of that particular item. Or a serialized item would be individual serial numbers that I'm tracking. And then you get this other screen that comes up where it's going to list everything it finds in the location that I'm selling it to. So notice I'm not seeing anything yet because all locations doesn't have anything. But if I switch to my Red Wing store, now I get the items that are available at this location for this particular item of my bikes. So I can see if I scroll over, I have a quantity available of 2 silver boys 6-speed bikes and 2 purple girls 6-speed bikes. So I'm going to sell one of these. And it came across with my price of $130. I could overwrite that price if I want to, but this was the suggested price that was in my inventory item. So when I click OK, it comes back, and now I can see that it took out my youth bike of 1 at the cost of $65, but the revenue is going to be $130. If I needed to go back into that lotted detail because maybe I made the wrong mistake, there is a column that you can add if you're using lotted serialized items. We can go back on that blue row, right click, go to add remove columns, and add the column for lot serial number. That will add another column out here, and it will only be highlighted in yellow when it is a lotted item. Notice it's gray because my first item of the helmet is not a lotted or serialized, it's just an inventory item. But I can click this button. If I had made a mistake and chose the wrong one of the one I want to ship here, I could switch to the other one. So those are some other details that you can use with the lotted serialized. And again, it's doing the same journal of making the cost of goods and inventory journal of expensing out that particular inventory. And down at the bottom again is my information. I'm on my row of the youth bike, so it's telling me what do I have on hand right now for those youth bikes in the particular inventory location that I've selected. Down at the bottom of the screen, you can see that the sales tax was updated as I entered my inventory items, and I have my sales tax. You can click the button to see how that's getting divided and could be adjusted if needed. If there were any freight or other miscellaneous charges that you want at the bottom of the invoice for this particular purchase, you can add those at this point. And if there were any miscellaneous and you needed your profit center or other details assigned, you can click that button to do that. At this point, this invoice is ready to be saved, and that would create the invoice and print that out for me. If by other options are if the customer has paid you already at this time of the invoice, you can click amount received. And if there were a customer deposit, you could apply that. If he paid some of it already, you can select your bank account and put in the amount, just like with a regular customer invoice of a sales service item or non-tracked. We're going to go ahead and save this invoice. And one other thing I should indicate, if you need to return, if you have a customer return of an inventory item, and let's just return a, they're switching helmets. So we're going to pick one of the other helmets and pick the dragster, and let's say we're returning that one. It's the same way as in your sales or service. You're going to just put in a negative in the quantity, and then that will create the negative amount. So notice it adjusted our subtotals and tax, and it just reversed out that particular inventory. And it will have put the inventory back too. A -1 is going to put the inventory back in again instead of taking it out. So that is the step if you need to return an inventory item. If you need to return a lotted serialized item, you would click the button over here of your added column that you brought in for lotted serial. And again, there you would put in a -1, and that would return that. Like that, and you'll end up with a -130, and now we totally have a negative invoice here because we had created just the helmet as one positive amount and the bike decreased it. So we're going to go back to our lotted serial, change that back to a +1, and click OK, and we're ready to save our invoice. And saving our invoice did the journal for decreasing the inventory and increasing the cost of goods, and it increased our accounts receivable and offset it with the revenue.